overview. John, I can hand it over to you to right afterwards to do your slide deck. That'd be okay? I think we should be ready to go. How do I share my screen here? That's always throws me off. Okay. Well, my screen is up, but I can't seem to share anything.
Oh, you're a co-host, so you can share it.
I can? Okay, here we go.
One at a time. Only one person.
One at a time.
The co-host too, yeah.
You guys can see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, guys, let's start. I wanted to introduce Dr. John Francis, who I've known for, I guess, close to 25 years. Some may have read his biography. I guess his story began in 1971 when he saw two tankers collide in the San Francisco Bay, spilling oil. And I think what happened right after that is he decided he took a vow not to speak or not to walk, or to walk and not to use automobiles, trains, or anything else, and also not to speak. Now, the incredible part of that journey was that while only walking and not talking, he got a degree in math and science and also a PhD from the University of Wisconsin without saying a word. And it's kind of amazing. I think the way John described it to me that time is he learned more by not talking. He learned more by listening than by talking. I probably would be best to hear it in his own words. But I ran into John 25 years ago when I was running the School Tone Alliance. He was introduced to me. This was a nonprofit alliance to dealt with distance learning. And he was introduced to me as a UN Goodwill Ambassador. And he was trying to do a walk across Cuba to talk about organic farming. And John, you probably remember this was like many years ago.
Yes.
And this was 2001 when distance learning was kind of a dream. We didn't have the internet. So we actually got a satellite from NASA to transmit with a backpack, with a heavy backpack on his back, and had him walk across Cuba, transmitting his lectures or his discussions in real time to schools in Oakland. This was like the first distance learning project, a very expensive one because NASA was the guys who were broadcasting it way before the internet and distance learning was common. Anyway, that was quite inspirational the way it was done. It was very successful. And then he's doing a walk right now across Africa with modern technology, and that's what he's going to be talking about. And this is to deal with telemedicine. And I guess there is a lot of kind of human interest learnings from his talk, apart from the technology. There's a lot of observations that he has made and he has shared with me and in his books and also in his documentary movie. So I'd like to have him speak about it. And I guess since you're speaking, that's good. And I guess I'd pause right there and I guess to quote Fraser Crane, we are listening. Go ahead, John.
Okay, well, thanks, Shirish, and thanks for having me here. See if I can make sure. Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you. Just need to press the button to share.
So with this new technology, we have gone light years beyond where it was when we met Shirish, and we're able to do things today that we could only dream about and hardly even imagine would be possible today. But I want to start with going back to a little bit about how I got to be at this place. And I saw that picture of me on the cover of the book that I wrote, my biography or memoir, as they say that is. And this is who I was at that time after giving up riding in cars And that's the first thing I did was to stop riding in cars. And I didn't ride in cars. And people in my community, I lived in a small community in Northern California called Inverness. And there were about maybe 300 people in that community. And when I stopped riding cars, people started arguing with me about what I was doing and how that was going to make any difference. And I argued back and forth about, thinking, yeah, I knew what I was doing, and it is going to make a difference. But when I really thought about it, I'm not sure that I knew that it could make a difference. In fact, I thought that when I stopped riding in cars, everyone was going to join me because people were so upset about the oil spill. People said things like, John, we want to give up riding in cars because look at this oil. We say things. We're able to say these things. And so when I did it, I just expected that all those people that had said those things were going to join me and we're all going to walk together into the land of happiness and paradise, and people would just not ride in cars anymore. We would have this economy of being on foot. Well, of course, that didn't happen. And people just argued with me about it being silly and me being crazy. I decided that on my 27th birthday, I was going to just not talk for one day. Just one day. I was so tired of arguing. I decided I would not talk for that one day. And so when my birthday came around, I did. I stopped speaking. I stopped speaking, and I realized that, I had not been listening. I, th- I thought that I knew everything. And because I thought that I knew everything, I would just think about what someone was saying long enough just to figure out how I could get my point in, or that they were wrong and I was right, and I would tell them the right thing, but I wasn't listening to them. I would listen to them just enough to figure out what I thought they were going to say and how I could interrupt them, or uh, show them that I knew the right answer, I was smarter, or they were wrong. And that was a very sad day for me, but it was also a very happy day for me. The sad part came from the fact that I realized that I had missed this opportunity to learn from so many people who had come before me, who had wanted to say things to me. The good part of that was that I was going to be able to do that now. I could learn to listen to everyone, because everyone had something to say. And so the first day and the second day and the third day, people started to wonder when I was going to start talking again. And I was like going, gee, I'm learning so much. I don't know when I'm going to start talking again. And so I decided that I would do it for a year, and that quieted all the voices in my head to make me want to start speaking again, and just continue to listen. And I can remember that people started coming up to me and, wanted to talk to me because they knew I wasn't going to talk back to them. I wasn't going to argue with them, and they could tell me things. So people would come up and tell me dreams they had, or secrets they had, things that weren't exactly politically correct, but they needed to tell someone because they figured and they felt that no one else would really listen to them, and that I would. My parents, before I stopped talking, when I had given up riding in cars, had my mother called, and talked to my mother on the phone, and I said, I've given up riding in motorized vehicles. And she said, so what for? And I said, the environment. And my parents were back in the East Coast and in Philadelphia, and I was now on the West Coast. And so that was like a big thing. You mean you don't ride in cars? And my father was like on my mother's shoulder, well, why didn't he do this when he was 16? Because when I was 16 and I had to have a license, I had to get a car, and that would have just saved them so much trouble. And I said, I didn't know about the environment then. Well, now I didn't speak and I couldn't call my mother, so I had to write a letter and explain to her that not only had I given up riding in cars, but that I had stopped speaking and I didn't know when I was going to start speaking. And so my mother wrote me back and said, your dad's going to be on the next plane. He's coming out to see you. And my father came out to see me, and he came to this little town of Inverness where, I look like this now, and I come from a, kind of a middle class family, and uh, where everyone is expected to go to school. I mean, I did start university after high school, but I dropped out. I soon became a hippie. And I think that's what hippies look like there. And so my dad came to Inverness, and let's see if I can find a picture of Inverness that I painted, because I painted so many. So this is Inverness. Can we see that?
You're still looking at your picture.
It's a picture of it's a painting.
No, it's a picture of you, this original picture of you on
Oh,
Shoreline
okay. So
International. Yeah.
um
Is there another picture you want to share?
let's see. I'm sharing this. We'll see how I do that now.
You can just close
This
that and try
is
something else.
okay. Okay, let's see if I stop sharing and then I
Yeah.
share. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, that works.
Okay. So this is a a painting that I did, and I show this painting because when I stopped talking, I was painting every day, and I just started painting. I making watercolors, and this is Inverness. This is the painting of Inverness that I made, and I paint every day. So I would paint something every day. I would find something, and that was my work. Was was to walk, to look around, to listen, and to paint. And so my involvement with the environment became very intimate in the sense that um, that was the journey that I was on, which was being part of the environment and understanding that I was part of the environment. And so I started walking further afield. My dad came out. He wanted me to talk, but I didn't. It was a kind of a uh, I'm not, it was a moment that my father, I was so happy to see my dad because I hadn't seen him for several years. But then, he wanted me to say something, wanted me to get in the car with him and drive to the hotel that he was staying in. And I decided I was going to walk to the hotel. And when he shook my hand and he said, "How are you?" And I went, that I was fine, I was happy, but that made him unhappy to see me like that. And he called my parents and called my mother up, and he said, "Yes, he's here. I found him. He doesn't do drugs. He seems like people like him, but he doesn't ride in cars. He just doesn't talk." And my mother wanted him to bring me back to Philadelphia, and he says, "I don't think this would work back there," he said. And so he flew home and left me. They all left me to my devices there on the West Coast in Inverness. And I continued walking and exploring, painting and playing the banjo. I started playing the banjo, which you see me carry on my shoulder, and as I'm walking down the railroad tracks playing the banjo, and I learned how to play the banjo, and that kind of took the place of, along with the painting, my communication with the outside world. I ended up walking across the United States, and this was, I guess, very interesting for me because I've never done anything like that, and because I was walking, if I decided that, if I was going to get anywhere, I had to walk. And when I went to school, I lived in a wilderness area called the Kamiapsis Wilderness in Oregon. I walked up there and spent a winter in the wilderness. And when I came out, I decided that I would go to school in Oregon, this Ashland, Oregon, and I went to the school. It was a very small school of about maybe 5,000 students all total. And I went and I told the student, the registrar, I came in and I went, he says, well, you want to study, you want to think here. And I nodded and he says, we have a program just for people like you. And which I thought was pretty amazing. But what he was saying that the program was something called prior learning experience, which you could use what you did in the outside world, in the non-academic world, and you could fit it into things in the academic world. And so my climbing the mountain in Mount Shasta was a peak experience, which I could write up to psychology. I could keep bees, and I kept bees, like 40 hives for someone, and that could be natural history. I could live in a wilderness area, and that would be something where they would take students into the wilderness area for 2 weeks and walk around and identify some plants and things in the geography, and that could be natural history. I wrote magazine articles. That was writing. I could play the banjo. That was music, and that with academic courses, you could get up to 2 years of credit, and I got 2 years of credit, and of course I had to take the other academic courses as well, and so I graduated in 2 years with 2 years of credit. My dad came out to visit me and see me graduate, and he could not believe that I had graduated college because I had already dropped out. But now I'm graduating college with a degree in 2 years. How could that be? And I just kind of hunched my shoulders, and I just didn't know. And I grabbed my banjo and I continued walking. Well, I apprenticed as a wooden boat builder to learn how to build boats because I was thinking of walking around the world. And when I graduated the University of the college in Oregon, Southern Oregon College, it was now a university, of course. Uh, I graduated with you had to write a long-term and a short-term goal. My short-term goal was to finish school. My long-term goal was to walk and sail around the planet as part of my education, in the spirit and hope that I could benefit humankind. And and that's a really important thing that I want to say again, because this is going to reoccur as I continue joining my journey, but this is also going to direct me into how I'm going to journey, what this journey is about. And it's not about me. It's about my education, of course, to understand more, because I don't know, to accept that. But it's also about a service to all of us. And that's, I think, was the most important time for me, which is when I had to stop and think, what are you doing? What is this about? I mean, okay, you're going to school. What what are your goals? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to take this? And so it's to walk and sail around the planet in the spirit and hope that I could benefit mankind. And and so that's the journey that I was on. And I chose 18 years. I thought I was going to do this in 18 years because that's about what it takes to raise someone, to raise a young person to their 18 years. And then you let them go. And I figured this would be something like that. And so I continued walking across the United States to I think I went back to the Bay Area, of course, and I apprenticed as a wooden boat builder, and then I walked back up to Port Townsend, Washington, and began building a boat, a a small dory skiff, which someone had asked me to build for them. And the boat building community in Port Townsend, Washington welcomed me, and I built my first wooden boat on my own and rowed it across Puget Sound to Bainbridge Island, where the people who wanted the boat from me came and they picked it up and they took that back. And I continued on to across the state of Washington, Idaho, and down into Missoula, Montana. Now, 2 years earlier, I had applied to the graduate program at Missoula, Montana, the graduate program in environmental studies. I was so happy to find that there was a program that you could study environment back in uh, the early 80s that I right away applied to that program. And so it took me 2 years to get there. And they asked me, they said, John, how long will it take you to get here? Because you're walking. And I said, it'll take about 2 years because I had to go to Washington, build a boat, and finally walk across there. When I got there, and I love the story to say this story because I want to tell you, I could not do this by myself. And I'm going to remind you as well that I can't do this by myself. When I got to the University of Montana, I was sitting at the steps of Jeanette Rankin Hall, which was the place for the environmental studies program. And up walks the director, Tom Roy. He says to me, "You must be John Francis." Oh, maybe because I'm not saying anything, and maybe because I had a banjo. But he said, are you ready to go to school? And I took my hands and I put them in my pockets and I pulled them out. He says, what? You don't have any money? And I'm figuring I'm going to have to go on because I don't have any money and I didn't get any scholarships. He said, come back tomorrow and we'll work everything out. Oh, of course, I'm back the next day to figure out how he's going to work everything out. And Tom gave me $100 in cash. He says, here's $100. I want you to register for 1 credit, reading and conferencing. He says, you're going to walk to South America, aren't you? And I had no idea. And he says, how about rivers in South America? Well, let's call it hydrological systems in South America. So I thought, wow, that's an interesting thing. He says, I'll register for 1 credit. So I did hydrological systems in South America. And when I came back, he says, now that you've registered for 1 credit, here's a key to the office. You have an office now as a graduate student. And besides that, you get to use the library. And now you're matriculating here at the university. What the professors of the courses you have to take on this first year of your graduate program have decided is that they're going to let you take their classes without registering. And they're going to save your grades until we figure out how to get the rest of the money. And then they'll give you that grade. And then when we figure out how to get the rest of the money, you register for those courses, they'll give you the grades. And besides that, because it has taken you 2 years to get here, we knew you were already interested in being here. We're going to give you an in-state tuition because you are already here, really. I never heard of financial aid that way. And so I went to the University of Montana and was able to graduate in a year and a half with my master's degree. And I wrote on war, peace, and environment, how we change the world. The Pilgrimage of Change, War, Peace, and Environment, which looked at pilgrimage and journeys throughout history and my own journey and my own pilgrimage and how I was looking at the environment through this journey. Well, I continued on. My dad showed up again for graduation, of course, and he just couldn't believe it. You've got a master's degree. You didn't ride in cars. You didn't talk. But what are you going to do with a master's degree if you don't ride in cars and talk? And again, I hunch my shoulders and I grab my banjo and my backpack and I continue on. And I continue on across the United States, all the way to South Dakota, and then to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, I get to work on my PhD. They give me a fellowship. They give me a fellowship, and my dad comes to visit again after I've been there for about a year, and I'm taking my final examinations. I'm studying oil spills because that's why I'm walking. And it turns out that no one else is studying oil spills. And my friends and my colleagues say, John, why are you studying oil spills? What kind of a job do you think you could get? Well, I'm not really looking for a job. I'm studying oil spills to understand what's going on with that and how that affects the environment. And so when my dad shows up, he says to me, he says, John, you know, the whole family were just so amazed at what you're doing. My sister says, I should leave you alone because you seem to be doing so much better when you're not saying anything. Not saying anything. Huh. But what are you going to do with a PhD if you don't ride in cars and talk? He says to me, PhDs are a dime a dozen. I go, oh. I hunch my shoulders, I grab my banjo, and I continue on. I get all the way to the East Coast and I start speaking again. And here is another one of those moments in your life. You're starting to speak again. And I think this is in everyone's life. We have all these moments, these special moments that mean so much to us in your lives and our lives. We have them. And I start speaking again and I have to think, oh, well, what am I going to say? My first words, what are they going to be? And the first words I stop and I think, thank you for being here. After 17 years of not speaking, I'm saying thank you for being here. And the reason is because I realize without you, and my words mean nothing. There is no communication without you. And so I wanted to thank all the people who had come to hear me speak. And let's see, when my parents came, I was in Washington, D.C., and they're from Philadelphia. Some friends from Washington came. The National Geographic sent someone to record what I said. The Los Angeles Times, they sent someone to hear what I said. It was an amazing moment. Thank you for being here. I said those words and they kind of came out of my mouth and I stopped because my mother, she jumped up out of her chair and she said, well, hallelujah, Johnny's talking. You know, my dad said that's one because he wanted me to start talking, but he also wanted me to drive in cars and ride in cars. I was so shocked. I turned around to see who was talking. I didn't recognize my voice. And so I turned around to see who was saying what I was thinking. Who was saying what I was thinking? And I realized, oh, that must be me. That's how I sound. And I started to laugh because it's so funny. I didn't even recognize my own voice. My dad was sitting in the audience and I could see him going, yeah, look at him. He really is crazy. But I'll tell you, I found it so difficult to talk that I decided I was going to read something from Linton Caldwell because I just this making these words up that came in my head, and there's a lot going on, so I could understand how come the babies don't say things right off. So I read something from Linton Caldwell about how the environment was really not so much about the physical environment around us, but it was a crisis about mind and spirit, mind and spirit. And I started thinking about that those were the first things that then I realized it was even harder to read things and that I couldn't do it really very well. And so I just decided I would go around and speak with individuals and groups of people together. And so I did that for the rest of the day. But I realized that something about the journey, that environment was about not so much the physical, what was going on, but because people were the environment, how we treated each other was also really very important. It was like the foundation. If you wanted to be an environmentalist, you would have to be concerned with about how we treated one another, because as people were part of the environment, we said that, oh yeah, we're part of the environment. Then how we treated each other was our first opportunity to treat the environment in a sustainable way, or even understand or figure out what we mean by sustainability is in our relationship with each other. Our relationship with each other. And so environment to me became about human rights and civil rights and gender equality and economic equity and all the ways people relate to one another. If we oppressed each other, the environment would respond. If we exploited each other, the physical environment would respond. So how we treated each other was really fundamental to environmental sustainability. And so my journey across America taught me one amazing thing. People were kind to me. And because of that kindness, I was able to be here with you today. Because of the kindness that I experience all over the world, I'm able to be with you here today. I walked the length of South America, and visited Antarctica. I remember walking to across Venezuela and then through the Amazon, through Brazil, up into Bolivia, the Altiplano, and the Altiplano to Buenos Aires in Argentina. And when I got to Buenos Aires, I had been made a UN Goodwill Ambassador. And there was a press conference for me there. And the diplomats from the United States State Department came and met me out on the road. And they took me to see the head of government. and I spoke at a Lincoln school. And one of the participants of my talk, one of the listeners of my talk said, "John, would you like to go to Antarctica?" And I thought, well, yes, I'd love to go to Antarctica. And I was also an ambassador not only to the United Nations, but to the GLOBE program. And the GLOBE program was a international environmental education program that had begun in 1994 with the help of Al Gore. And it was now around the world in 5,000 schools, 5,000 schools in maybe 20 countries. Students at this program would collect environmental data on a 30 by 30 meter square. That was the resolution of Landsat. And so they were actually doing ground truthing. They could take out the soil moisture, the temperatures, the cloud cover on this scale, the rainfall, these kinds of environmental data that they would also give now to NASA, who collected this, and they would put that on a GIS map and share that with scientists around the world who could do studies on climate change. And they only asked that they use that data, if they use the data, that they share that with students around the world because they were collecting it. Well, they flew me to a globe school in Antarctica. And then I came back across, I spent a month in Antarctica and came back across to Ushuaia and was ready to go over to Africa. But my fiance, we'd been dating, I guess, for 10 years. She suggested that I stop and we have a family, which we did. And now my youngest son has gone off to college. And then she said, well, John, I think you better start doing what you wanted to do, what you started off to doing, and that is to walk across Africa. And so I began this journey across Africa. And I began a journey across Africa, and I'm going to throw up another slide here. Let's see if I can do that. How do I do that?
Just click on it, you press the
Okay.
share button. Yeah. Just
And
like you did
am I,
before.
say again?
Just click the share button and you'll see the
Oh,
options.
I haven't. Oh, I have to stop that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
It's already stopped. You just need to click the share button and pick the new one.
Okay, okay, I can get the new one now. All right. I think it's this one. Oh, wait a minute. Ah, here it is. I'll share. Oh, okay. So I began walking across Africa, and it's kind of interesting. I was on a board of um, a nonprofit called the Interstellar Foundation. And my friend at the Interstellar Foundation, he told me that he wanted to work with getting messages from students around the world on a spacecraft like Carl Sagan did on the spacecraft Voyager that goes out leaving the solar system. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to make a golden record, so to speak, that is going off and possibly communicating with other beings in other planets and other solar systems. And I thought that was pretty cool, so I wanted to be part of that. And so we started working on that, and we decided we would call our program Aspire. The What do you aspire? That's what we would ask the students and children around the world. What do they aspire for the planet? And eventually, we did get a spacecraft to go off onto land on the moon, actually, with those aspirations from children around the world. But I remember asking or talking with Nick, his name was Nick Sierra, I saying, well, Nick, I want to walk across Africa, and that's what I'm thinking about now. And he said, well, John, do you know where I live? And I said, gosh, with this technology that we have, I wasn't sure exactly where you lived. He says, well, John, I just moved. I lived in South Africa, and I just moved to Cape Town, where you're going to have to start walking. And he said, I'm going to host you when you come to Cape Town. So I came to Cape Town. It was last year, and started walking. We walked 100 miles. And now I've returned, and I'm walking another, I think it was 400 miles when I went back the last time. And so we are at about 700 miles from Cape Town, at a place called Beaufort West. Now, every time I go back, there's just more happening. I'm working with the GLOBE program still, doing international education and collecting data with mosquito habitat and soil moisture and ground cover and cloud cover and those things. And then something else happened just recently. A friend of mine and Dr. Milton Chen, who graduated from Stanford, and we did some work back in the early 2000s, in 2000, I think even before we went to Cuba, Sharice, and he was developing a platform to do telemedicine, which he absolutely did. It is now publicly traded. It's called VC. And he learned about my journey, and he said, John, would you be interested in taking a telemedicine, a platform with you? And I said, well, let me think about it, because I would love to do that, but I didn't really have the support to to take a telemedicine platform, and I didn't really know how to use it. I mean, I could use it for myself, but that's maybe not exactly the most beneficial way to use this. And so I talked to some people, and we decided that we could take a telemedicine platform with us, and that we would use it, and that probably the best thing to do with it at this point would be to work with a program that Milton had already developed for prenatal and for the first 1,000 days of a newborn's life. And so he just sent the telemedicine platform with us to me to look at. It's with some doctors right now who are going over it, and we have some more meetings scheduled before I leave to work with governments and the government of Botswana and the Union of Physicians and Nurses and doctors from medical schools to volunteer to actually put this program into practice. And it's just one of those things where if I go back to the beginning of this journey and back to where I am walking, not only just to walk, but for my my own education and in the spirit and hope that I could benefit humankind, and I changed that to all living beings, uh, then here we are today, and here Planetwalk is today, some many years after it has begun, but it has, I guess, morphed into and evolved into something much bigger than me. I'm very happy to say that it's bigger than me because it shows that the communication is going on. But this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen without all of your involvement. And you can see that, as I say here, VCs globally respected around the world. And the purpose of this is a collaboratory. It's to deploy these pop-up telemedicine clinics, um, and to understanding, some underserved, served communities. And here we are at another turning point where we need an influx of more energy, influx of more financial help. I have been just going along, and as I did in Montana, things just happen. And I was able to get this education. I was able to become a PhD in environmental studies because of kindness. And so I'm hoping that we can continue this journey together as we're growing Planetwalk, and that Planetwalk will allow you to be part of what's going on today in Africa without the input of USAID and what's going on in our country. This is another avenue to support kindness around the world. And so I'm going to invite you all to be part of that. And I have a QR code at the end of this, which is our GoFundMe page. We are trying to raise $150,000 for a 6-year project. This is going to take 6 years. It's not going to be a quick thing. And then we have leave behinds, which we can discuss later in our question and answer if we have any. And I think that's about it. So I want to thank you all very much for having me, and I hope that I haven't bored you.
That's great. John, I have a question here, which is you've traveled across at least 3 continents, if not 4, and had the opportunity to do it on foot as opposed to any other mechanism. What could you say about cultural differences, let's say in Latin America versus the United States versus Africa?
What do I see the differences?
Yeah. How do
And
people differ in these places? How are humans different?
yeah, I think that kindness, number one, translates throughout different cultures and different places and spaces. That kindness supersedes that. Kindness transcends, I should say, all the politics and policy, and which is what I found walking across America. It transcended politics and policy and racial divides and those things that we put up, that we used to make ourselves different from each other. Of course, in the morning, I still meditate and try to get back to that place of silence where we're all connected. And so I find myself in Africa, the same connection, even particularly in South Africa, which has another complicated history that I have been taken in by, white South Africans uh, uh, who have taken me in and have walked with me and shared food with me in their kindness. And uh, I see that there are some differences in a sense that there are still many groups, tribal groups that are separated not by color, but by ideology, culture, uh, and I guess I'm still learning about those differences and the similarities that we all have. But yeah, I learn something all the time. When I got to South Africa, uh, my I guess my first thing is to say is I don't know and I'm going to listen. So, and I think Afrikaans is ik, ik weet niet, ik weet niet. But I need to learn South African Afrikaans, and I don't know Afrikaans. But English is used to bring everyone together, which is a good thing because I do understand English.
So there are a few questions from the audience here. I can read them from Saurabh. One question is, have you not sat in a motorized vehicle all these years? Or do you still avoid vehicles, or how do you get around now?
I do, when I'm in South Africa, I still use planes and trains and things now. And I don't think I told that story about how when I was walking through South America, I got to Venezuela, to El Dorado, the prison of El Dorado, and felt that I was in a prison that as I walked past the prison gate and was demanded, to show my passport, and I said that I, was a goodwill ambassador, and I was walking around the world, and I was trying to use what I was as a uh, what was it, a costume, so to speak, and see if I could break out of the prison I was in, and they let me go. They just let me walk by, and I realized that there's a whole story to that, but I realized that I was in prison, and the prison was of my own making, and I had to let myself out. And so it took me about 100 miles to get to the next place. And I decided that when I got to the border of Brazil and Venezuela, I was going to let myself out of the prison. Well, I did. And I went back to the United States. I used a bus. A VW bus was the first vehicle that I rode in from the border. And every I could feel the industrialized transportation, what it meant, um, as opposed to what it was to just walk, like most people on the planet who are just walking. I finally got on a plane. I flew back to the United States, and I knocked on the door of my parents' house. It was Christmas Eve. And I had told them that my friend Foued was going to come and visit them from Tunisia. And so that I knew that they would be home. And they said, well, we'll go pick him up. And I said, no, he'll get to your house, to the house. And they know him, and he would be there and visit many times before without me. And they said, well, but why is he coming on Christmas? Isn't he a Muslim? And I said, well, yeah, but he has off or something. I can't remember. But when I knocked on the door, my dad opened the door, and he looked out and he saw me, and he says, this is the happiest Christmas of my life. That's two, because I was not only speaking, but I was riding in cars. And my mother, I walked up to see my mother, and she said to me after, she said, Foued, it's so good to see you. And then she looked at me a little more, and she said, Fued, you know, you look a lot like our son, Johnny. And then she started crying because she says, you are our son, Johnny. And I thought, oh, I could do this a whole nother 17 years or 22 years just to get that reaction from my mom. But then I went back to where I left off, and that's what I started doing, going back to where I left off and continuing walking, because I realized that walking was still a mode of transportation or transport that allowed you intimate to a certain intimacy with the environment and with the people around you. And the people are part of the environment. And if that's true, then walking is the only way to really get that. So I continue to do that, and I continue to do it now. And I go back to Africa on the 14th of August to continue walking. So and then I'll walk. I guess I'll make it to Botswana this time. I'll be walking for 3 months and stopping to visit schools and also carrying the VC telemedicine clinic with us in order to promote more kindness.
So there's another question from Murli. How do you manage your health while walking through the highways, and how do you shelter at nights?
How do I manage
Your health?
my health?
Uh,
Does it
Well,
not basically did not take a toll on your knees, okay?
yes.
With all the walking and food, I mean, it's such a assume that you walk through the jungles or do you walk through highways? I'm just trying to understand when you walk through a country, how do you what path do you take?
Yeah, well, for example, going through South America and going through Brazil, it was through lots of jungle and with um, uh, native Waimuri, Atuari Indians, and so having guides um, uh, in South Africa, sometimes it's a highway, and then sometimes it's just a dirt track out in the desert, and being supported by a motorhome and camping along the way. Uh, these days, I have a motorhome that I follow and is the support vehicle, so that at night I get to sleep in the motorhome and I don't have to sleep out like I did when I was a young man. I'm close to I'll be 80 next year, so 79, and when I go back, I'll be 79, and my knees do pain me. I've been walking through that pain, but in fact, I have to visit a physician before I go. And maybe, we haven't talked about knee replacements yet, but maybe that's going to be something in my future.
Thank you.
So there's one question from Sunil Gulati. Sunil, do you want to just read the question yourself? It's kind of long, so might be better if you read it out or you ask it
I
on
just
audio.
want to ask you, what have you found? Who is running this world? Which is that force which is running this world?
Could you say that again, Sharice? Could you say my hearing? I should tell you, I have hard of hearing. I'm hard of hearing, hearing challenge. But I do have these headphones on. But sometimes it's just
saying,
hard coming through.
See, when you walk, you understand something so much about the world. So what have you found? Who is running this world? Which is that force that is running this world?
Donald Trump.
What has you discovered? What have you discovered?
I guess what have you discovered about the world in all your walking and listening?
Oh, yeah.
Which force is running the world? Which is the force that is running the world?
Yeah, I think the most first of all, I should say that every step that I make, there is all these things going on about the medicine and the education and the research, and those are all wonderful. But each step for me is a prayer. This is still, it has become a very spiritual journey for me. When I started off not speaking, it was because I didn't want to argue. I thought I did. I said, well, I'm just tired of arguing, not knowing that if I was going to not speak for 17 years, that something was inside me. How did I get to that place? Who put me on that? Who put me on that journey? What forces put me on that journey? So that now that I'm in another continent, on another continent, and walking. And so for me, like when I say I don't know, it's not that I don't know, it's that each step is a knowing. Each step is that process of knowing. And who is, if that's the question, then it's all of us. It's all of us, because there is no one else. It's just us. And we are so close to each other that the question is hard for me to answer, saying, that yes, it's just that it's all of us. It's just us. There's nobody else. Just us.
So on that note, there's one more question here from Saurabh. Saurabh, you just want to ask a question, or you want to read it?
Yeah, okay. So the social media basically happened while you were walking. And what do you think now that social media has enabled everyone to talk and have to have an opinion? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Is it making too much noise, you think?
That's a good question. I like it because I mean, social media, it's almost like it's just the mind, our mind. And there is I mean, there's so much going on. It's always that. It's whether it's social media now, or whether it's our, this technology, which is allowing us to allowing us to embrace the samsara, nirvana, the existence, like our minds. As someone said, that the true nature of this phenomena, the true nature is a true nature, the source of this phenomena, the source of everything that is really the true nature of our mind. And so this is all that. This is all that. And it's, to say that it's good or it's bad, it's just what it is. And here we are in it.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have. Is there anybody else? I don't see any more questions. John, thank you for this fantastic talk. It's just taken up us an hour. It went through pretty quickly, though. I think what we'll do is we're going to take this QR code and your GoFundMe thing. We'll send it out to everybody for people who are interested. And Saurabh, you're going to have this on YouTube as well, right? On audio, on video?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
The recording will come in a couple of days, and then we'll upload it to our channel that Khushro runs.
Okay.
Thanks a lot,
let's see.
John. That was wonderful. It was a very interesting talk. Very interesting to know about your life and your journey.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.